SFBBO, promoting sustainability by engaging communities for more than 40 years. Our Birdie Hour speaker series is a free virtual program. On September 19th, 2024, artist Jane Kim gave a talk, Drawing Wilson's Phalaropes, Understanding Feather Groups, for our community.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here tonight with all of you and, of course, talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is birds. I'm going to kind of walk you through a timeline of my work. Thank you for that introduction of who I am and what I do. I am a visual artist. I went to the Rhode Island School of Design, where I studied printmaking, and I moved to California right after I graduated in 2003. So I have been now in the Bay Area for a little over 20 years. And I came here because I really wanted to stay more connected to a city that was so close to amazing natural wonder. And San Francisco is really that. And I'm still astounded every single day as I work now in Half Moon Bay. My studio is in Pillar Point Harbor, and I live in San Francisco. So I'm hugging the ocean as I come down every day. And my commute down, I'm just reminded of just amazing environment that we are here and so privileged to live on and in. So I'm going to share my screen and get started on my presentation. Okay, so Inktwell. A little bit more history on my background. After coming to San Francisco, I really just started to realize that there was a part of my art practice that was still missing from what I was truly passionate about. And that part was the science of learning and curiosity and knowing more about our surroundings. And so I decided to go back to school, and I'm gonna walk you through how Inktwell became Inktwell. So this is a little series that I did actually in college. So I just wanted to, like I said, go all the way back to my roots as an artist. And I had a winter session period in Venice, Italy, at a print studio in Venice. And of course, the pigeons just really struck me. So I did a whole series of all these little pigeon linoleum cuts. But as you can see, they're kind of crude and stylized depictions, and not at all scientifically accurate. And really, I was just more connected to this bird from an aesthetic, and watching them it was just so fun to watch these birds, you know, in San Marcos Square. But I didn't necessarily feel like I was getting to know the bird. It was a very one-sided relationship. And I have all these other paintings when I moved that was very tied to my interest in wallpapers, because it was a way for the general public to adorn their spaces. And what was often depicted in wallpapers was the natural world and so many birds. And so I kind of went through this history of wall coverings and pulled different motifs that I would find from historic wallpapers and again, recombine them. And now in hindsight, when I look at something like this, which was painted, you know, back in 2005, I think, gosh, what bird was that? I don't even know. So, you know, maybe it was this pheasant, and you know, somebody then stylized. And it really, and here's a few more other sort of representations of different motifs of birds in different wallpapers and fabrics and ornamentation. But again, it's not really about the bird. It's more about the design. And so as I move forward with what was really starting to become interesting is wanting to really get to know the bird itself. And, you know, here's another painting where the birds are becoming much more lifelike and recognizable as magpies. But when you look at this painting, and again, I'm looking at this in hindsight, there's like two different species of magpie here, and they wouldn't really exist together, but I didn't know that at the time. I was just pulling images of magpies, and ooh, I like this one and I like this one, and it still felt like a very one-sided relationship. And here's another piece that I created. And at the time, I had no idea that the reference that I had pulled was of a juvenile magpie. And I now know that because the more I became curious and asked questions and learned more about birds, that extra skin that you see on juvenile birds on the beak, that fatty bit, will clue you in on the age of the bird if their feathers are similar to their adult plumage. So I had inadvertently depicted a little juvenile here, which actually fits nicely with this, grub painting and theme, but I wish I had known. So I think there was this, I want to know. And so I remember back, and this was probably back in 2005 or so too, but I was visiting the La Brea tar pits and amazing cases of bird skeletons, and behind them, life-size depictions of those birds by John Dawson, who is an artist in Florida. And he was the one who did those postage stamps back in the 90s, those habitat postage stamps where you could get a poster and you can peel off those postage stamps. But I remember seeing these paintings and absolutely stopped me in my tracks. And I couldn't pull myself away from these cases. And there were a couple of things that stood out to me. Not only were his paintings beautiful, but it really helped me understand the skeletons more. It made me more interested in the articulated skeletons. It made me more interested in the information, the exhibit, and the experience that I was having there. And I very distinctly remember thinking to myself, I want to do that. That is so amazing. And I really found myself just more and more inspired by interpretations in natural history museums and signage and magazines. And I decided that I needed to maybe turn my attention to another form and art practice, and that was scientific illustration. So that is one of the reasons why I really love saying visual artist and science illustrator, because my practice is really about how those two have come together. And so I went to the California State University, Monterey, CSUMB, in Monterey Bay, and they have their science illustration program as an extension, part of their extension program. And it's a year-long boot camp of a program where you learn all things science illustration. And so these are a couple examples of paintings that I created during the program, and they aren't like super straightforward scientific illustration. So already then I was starting to play with interpretation of information in my paintings. And that led me to the Wall of Birds at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I was very fortunate to have been selected as a Bartels Science Illustration intern. Now it's this Bartell Science Illustration program, so it's a little bit different. It's evolved. This was in 2011. Yes, 2011. And so I had the great privilege of working at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology for about 5 months. And during those 5 months, I worked directly with the former director, John Fitzpatrick, on a couple of different assignments. And, it came up that I was interested in doing murals. And so when I said that, his face sort of lit up and he said, "Really?" And so he walked me out to the balcony overlooking this wall. And he said, "Ever since this building has been erected, I have always wanted a mural in the visitor center. Would you be interested in painting that?" And I nearly fell off the balcony when he made me that offer. And of course, I went back to my studio desk and sent him a proposal of what this could look like and it could be. And he had hoped for a evolution of bird focused mural. And so this is how we ended and landed on the Wall of Birds, which is a mural that at the time in 2015 depicts the 243 families of birds that were described on a world map. All the birds are depicted to scale. And then as you walk up the stairs, you see a parade of today's our birds' ancestors, starting with the Tiktaalik, which is a lobe-fin fish. So that's like almost 4 million years ago. If you can't visit the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, because I know it is quite a journey to get there. You can always visit this digital interactive that the Lab of Ornithology created after the painting was completed. And I have to say, I didn't know that this was happening. And I'm really glad that I didn't know in advance, because I had no idea that the public would be able to zoom in to each one of these paintings so closely. Because when you're at the lab, you'll see that you can't really get up close to many of the birds, which are higher up. And the only way to view it is by walking up the second level onto their landing. And there are binoculars and iPads where you can use this interactive to experience the paintings a little bit more closely. But you can zoom in. It's kind of like Google Maps. And so you are able to move through the mural, and then each bird is then hyperlinked. And there is a sidebar that pops up that not only tells you a little bit about this particular species, you can say, I love this bird. You can also listen to an audio recording of this bird if they have it. And as you know, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Macaulay Library has the largest sound collection of natural sounds. And it is an amazing resource. So I love going in and listening to all these calls, and the Woodson is one of our most interesting prehistoric birds. And you can also learn about the family that the Woodson belongs to. And then at the very bottom, there is an eBird map with various observations made by all of you. So this is just one really cool tool. And spinning off of the Wall of Birds was a couple of years later, a book that my husband and business partner, Thayer Walker, wrote together. And it chronicles various stories of different selected birds. And it also showcases every single image of each bird that was painted in this book. But it also walks you through a little bit of my artistic process. And so this is a page from that book where I'm talking about the palette. And I sort of created my own avian Pantone, and it walks you through how those different colors were used. And so I had, on the left, you see the underpainting, and that was done all with latex house paint. And then my drawing is transferred on top of that base. And then I come in with acrylic paint and paint in my details. And I'll jump back to this page in a little bit, but to move forward, if you are familiar with an avian Pantone, that was really borrowed from Robert Ridgway, who is an American ornithologist who created in let's see, I have one of the first editions of this book here. And he was the first to want to create a color standard for talking about how to describe birds and insects and flowers. And that way we could all agree on like a single color when we describe, any one of these birds. I think it's quite a challenge to try to create such a rigid Pantone for nature, as it's not always just this one color. There's often variation, but I love the book. And actually the painting that is behind me is a piece that will be inspired by his book. And so this is Color Standards and Color Nomenclature by Robert Ridgway, 1912. There it is. That's when it was published.
And Jane, we did have one question about the mural.
Yeah.
Someone asked, wondering about which bird on the wall you feel is your best.
Oh boy. I am quite fond of here I can even come back to, well, yeah, the one on the cover, the great hornbill. I have always been a big fan of how that particular bird turned out. And I think not only as the end result, but the process of painting it, it just kind of like felt like it flowed out of my brush. And that always feels really, really good, because, man, I'll tell you, some of these other birds were a little bit more of a struggle. And, this one just kind of came right out. So Thanks for that question. Oh, okay. So there have been many things, and I think that the Wall of Birds will remain, in general, a major favorite of mine, because it's reflective of everything that is important to me. It is for the public. It is information and science. It is interpretation, and I love the scale of it. But there have been many things that have spun out of the Wall of Birds that I also find near and dear to my heart. One of them being this collaboration with Leigh, and they create sneakers and shoes. And we did this really fun shoe of the blue-footed booby, because how could you not represent the blue-footed booby if you're making shoes? And so they're embroidered, and each side is unique, and it depicts the four-step mating dance of the blue-footed booby. And so unfortunately, these shoes are currently sold out, but please go have a look at all the other amazing shoes that they offer. And we did another collaboration with them that highlights another mural of ours, part of the Migrating Mural series of the monarch butterfly. So there is another shoe out there that is available still. Oh, and then I just noticed that, there's this painting that's in progress in this shot. So I just wanted to share the final piece with you there. This is called 1,365 starlings. That's how many starlings are in this painting. And it's a number that is divisible by 7, as when starlings fly, each one is tracking its nearest 7 to stay in those formations and those murmurations. So that was a really wonderful painting to create. And so part of here, I'm going to walk you through a few other bird explorations. I was invited to come back to the Rhode Island School of Design to lead sort of a public project. And what I ended up doing was an egg painting course. And so I made wooden eggs that were life size, and guests got to hand paint their own. And this is, I did this 2 years in a row. But basically, you get to paint your own egg, and there's a kit. So back in 2020, when we were in thick of the pandemic, I did hold this class called Cloaca Magic. And when you signed up, you were sent a little box that had the wooden egg and pots of paint. And then it was an hour-long sort of webinar where you painted an avocet egg with me.
That's so creative. Thinking about painting the eggs. I wanted to share that there was another question from Kathleen. Do you always work that way, in underpainting, drawing, and details over it, or was that special for a mural?
That's a great question. That is usually special for a mural. And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology Wall of Birds was unique because the vantage point, the viewing, is quite at a distance from the wall. And so I needed to come up with a technique that was fast, but also allowed me to paint maybe slightly more graphic and a bit more exaggerated in kind of the form and the colors, so that you could see it from a distance. And there's actually a chapter in the book that talks about that. On the southern cassowary, I spent like 6 hours just lovingly painting the details on the face of the cassowary. And then I came back to the balcony and looked, and I was like, oh my God, you can't see any of that detail. And it was really deflating. And I said, oh, wow, I've got to figure out a different way to do this. And so the method that I used for the Wall of Birds and for a lot of murals you'll see are much more graphic and bold, so that they are really visible. So this is a perfect example of that. This is a mural that we painted in 2021 in Houston. And of course, Houston being one of the major thoroughfares for migratory birds, we created a piece about their different plumages. So on the left-hand side is the breeding plumage, the ones that we're familiar with, but then the non-breeding plumage on the right-hand side just show the mirror of these same birds in their different forms.
That's so interesting.
Here's a few different close-ups. Yeah, another question?
Yeah, the next question from Neela is, how long do you study a bird or birds before you design the artwork?
Oh, that's an interesting question. That can fluctuate. I can say for the Wall of Birds, I worked directly with a science advisor. Her name is Jessie Berry. She still is at the lab. And so for that process, of course, I was doing my own research, and then created a preliminary sketch. And then Jessie would review that sketch and she would let me know what needed to change in accuracies and this and that, and went back to the drawing board. So that was a very unique process, which was really wonderful. And I learned so much from that process. And um, I'm really going to be sharing with you in learning form that way. I had to very much zero in on understanding the bird from uh, a more specific science oriented way. So feather groups is where we're going to end in this conversation in this webinar. But for something like this, I really love reaching out to experts. And so I worked with Houston Audubon to help me select which birds would be included. And I really love interviewing and reading, and I watch videos. Or I'll collect several references. If I can visit a museum collection with skins, I will absolutely do that because that tells me so much about the bird as well. So research is extensive, but it can vary in terms of how I approach it. So here's it's a bike corridor and walking pathway. And then on the far left-hand side, I included birds that nest in nest in the summertime, and then on the right-hand side, birds that are there in the wintertime. So we have the full sort of season of birds in Houston. And here I am for scale. Oh, and I think someone mentioned in the chat that they saw kites. That was fun. Ruby-throated hummingbird here. And then we've got the kestrel, sapsucker, and cedar waxwings. And then, of course, even our murals are accompanied with interpretive signs. So this was hung on one side of the mural. So any passerby can dive in deeper to understand who is on the mural. Another project, speaking of what kind of research process I undergo, this was painted at Occidental College for the Moore Lab of Zoology in their new facility, and it's from like sea to sky. So there's on the lower level, a sea component that leads you up into the second level, which is where the skins are and the bird focus is. And each wall is like a different ecosystem. So we've got the chaparral, and then we have scrub and forested and the urban, and then we head down into an estuary environment. So here are just a few close-ups of those birds, and the birds that were selected for this are directly correlated to the research that the Moore Lab does and works on. So these were not painted to scale. So that was kind of a fun, different expression and approach where they said, don't worry about that. Let's just make it as dynamic and exciting and fun as possible. So I loved doing this sort of graphic style with naturally painted birds, which I thought was quite successful in letting each stand out on its own. Quickly go through here. So this is really wonderful because they actually let me bring study skins out, and I had to put them in a plastic bag, but really having the bird available to me to look at and reference was huge. And so there's the sea part, and as you walk downstairs, here's that estuary scene. And so these are early pictures. The cases are now filled out. And if you are in the Los Angeles area, I urge you to visit their facility. The Moore Lab has the largest hummingbird collection. And this is a private mural, and it's called The Hawk Flies High. It's based on a song, a jazz song called The Hawk, and an album called The Hawk Flies High. And I wanted it to look kind of like a musical staff where, the birds might be kind of notes flying away. And it's about various birds in the Bay Area. And you can see the aerial view of the Bay Area. It's at a kind of funky angle, but you can see the bay here, San Francisco, and then Hawk Hill is right behind this pole and moving over into the North Bay.
Beautiful.
And again, here are a few close-up depictions, detail shots of these paintings. Okay, and then here are a couple of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we have another question from Cherise. How long do murals typically take for you from conception planning, and then how much time does it take for the actual drawing and painting?
Oh, another really, you guys have great questions. Thank you. And each one is different. The Wall of Birds was quite unique. That was like a, let's see, from start to finish. It was including, the proposal, and then the lab having to get buy-in from the board and raising the money, all those things. There's so many parts that go into these big projects. That was from 2011. And then I got the green light in 2014 to start my preliminary and research process. And then from 2014 to 2000, that was 17 months on site at the lab of painting the mural. But typically something like the Confluence mural in Houston was 5 weeks. And of course, when I am working on this massive of a scale, it's not just me. I definitely hire a team to execute and produce with me. So it's not a solo endeavor by any means. But usually I would say murals, I like to keep them in the 2 to 6 week window, especially if it's outdoor. So, you don't want to be in the elements. You're really racing a lot of other factors. So this was a painting when I was a resident at the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco. I really was focusing on the ecology of Golden Gate Park, which is, of course, really man-made. And when I came back, so I finished the Wall of Birds in December of 2015, and I came back to the Bay Area in 2016. And like I said, I was gone for 17 months, and San Francisco had become a different place. I think that was really the heart of the tension of sort of another tech boom. And the neighborhoods were changing, and there was a lot of tension. The buses that were there for commutes, it was really quite impactful, and I felt it so strongly. And so a lot of my work was allegory around the environmental tensions for people that I was feeling, but also pairing that with this very man-made park called Golden Gate Park, and what lives there, what thrives there, what kind of plants are there. So this piece is about ravens and their nesting in, of course, non-native eucalyptus, and winding through them are lightning cable, iPhone lightning cables. And it's really about adaptation and about, I guess, being, oh gosh, what's the word? Opportunistic, right? And what does that really mean? Like, is it bad that the tech is here? How are we adapting as a city to this? So it was really about questioning our role in the city as well, and how we adapt to things, and using animals as a guide and inspiration of how we can be better. And then this was created for the Yawkey Woodson Art Museum. I was invited to be an artist in residence there, and created something called RG Bird. And what it was about the color blue, and how there's actually no pigment blue in the avian world. Even blue-footed boobies, their feet, it's all structural coloration. And so I wanted to show the indigo bunting in different levels of light. And so here the shadows are the different level of light, and how that that same bird can change in different light levels, and the appearance of that blue is really it's a perception of and a dance with light and dark. Cornerstones is kind of one of it's a favorite of mine from this series, and this was also included in the Woodson Art Museum's annual Birds and Art exhibit. If you aren't familiar with that, it has been running for, I think, over 40 years now. Speaking of 40 years, congratulations, SFBBO, on 40 years as well. It's amazing, but it's international bird artists, and it's a juried exhibition, but it's just astounding bird art. So this was in 2018, and this piece was included in that year's Birds and Art. But it's meant to be kind of like topsy-turvy. You know, you can turn the painting in any way, but it's really about finding cornerstones in the plants and the native plant and bird relationships.
And Jane, I shared with you earlier about Anastasia, our teen artist who designed our shirt. Well, she's here with us and she has a question. Her question is, do you come up with a storyline for your paintings first and pick birds to fit the narrative? Or do you choose the bird species first and craft the story around it?
Ooh, awesome question. I love your shirt, by the way. Beautiful depiction of the Wilson's Phalarope. And I think it can, usually I want to say it's about the story. I am very narrative driven, and that even underscores what kind of materials I will end up using and how I approach the painting. So for example, this is called Seafood Medley. And this was for a show that was around our relationship to food. And really it's about, you know, our disconnection to where food is from. You know, when you're kind of shopping in a grocery store and you just see a bag of seafood medley, you know, we forget that these are also diet that we share with our wild friends. So I did this painting where I was imagining like all these other birds that were wanting to like dine in with our seafood medley. So I had this like ceviche kind of margarita background. But what was really fun is that these birds were then used for an interpretation project in New York at the Jones Beach Energy and Nature Center. And we created the interpretive murals for their new nature center in 2020. And so these are just, you can see some of those same birds.
And we had
and I loved seeing,
sorry, a question here about your focus on the bird's eyes and wondering if that's sort of your signature and how you approach when you're doing the eyes of the birds. The person who sent the question, I think, is also a painter and says they their images are kind of more sharp and alarming and are wondering how you get the look that you have with the bird's eyes.
Yeah, and I know that there isn't a right answer for this. It's, I think, a personal it's just personal to the artist, but I personally love starting with the eye because for me it's kind of the anchor for, and every like if the placement of an eye. This is something that I learned when working with Jessie. That was a feature on the bird that she would pay very close attention to on my drawings to make sure that the eye placement was correct. And so then as I you know, as I was working with her, and that was just a theme that really kind of came up over and over again, I think that really shaped my own view of like, wow, the eyes are so important, and the spacing and where they are, you know, in the skull. So I think I just like to place a lot of emphasis on the eye, and then from there, everything can like radiate out to the other features. And for me, I think that I love seeing that eye take shape too, and then all the other stuff kind of comes along after. And yeah, I don't know there, but it's not something that I'm like, everyone should do it that way. I think it really is just a sort of a personal decision. And then this is oh, Anastasia, this is an example where I actually was like, I want to paint the common loon again. but I want to do it in a diving method. And so then the desire to paint the loon was more, it drove a bit more of the end result than the story did, and called this painting Soundings, which is a measure of water depth. And I wanted it to feel kind of like this, the sound or the call of a loon, which is one of my very favorite bird calls, will remain a very favorite bird call, and that like haunting sort of sound, echoey sound. So really that this one was maybe driven in the other way. Okay, so now we're back to here, which is what our title of our what Birdie Hour is drawing and understanding feather groups. So another thing that sprang out of that particular sort of page was a How to Paint Birds with Jane Kim with the Cornell Lab Bird Academy. And so it was really modeled after what I learned from painting the wall of birds, and sharing those secrets with all of you. And I think I used the wrong word, not secrets, but just techniques that I have learned along the way that I sort of now look back and wish, wow, it would have been great if someone could really articulate for me feather groups, because of course I'm sure you all so this is just a quick sort of what you're gonna see, and it's a pretty robust course. There's I think over like 20 videos. It's obviously at your own pace, and I dive through a lot of different it's broken up into parts, and one of those parts is about finding feather groups. And I'm sure most of you have a Sibley field guide. And in the front of his field guides, as you all, I'm sure, know, are these wonderful groups of feathers. But I remember when I was first starting off as, really digging into the science and the accuracy of birds, I understood the concept that feather groups are important, but I couldn't necessarily see them easily on a photo reference or in the field. And I felt very almost stunted by like feeling like I had to remember the specific names of feather groups, and that was also important. And as a decade later, I have found that really what it is, I wanted to help people break down feather groups in a way that didn't feel so intimidating. Because all it is that unlike humans, we're skin, right? And so like our features are very visible. Whereas the bird, if we were a bird, all our features would have a layer of feathers covering our entire body. But the cool thing is that they're called groups because they follow, of course, the anatomy of that bird. And when a bird moves, they're moving in like whole feather groups. Even though they can move individual feathers, they're really it's like plates, it's like armor of different body parts. And so when I think about feather groups, it's not even so much about the specific name, but really remembering that like there's like the cheek, there's the crown, there's the eyebrow, there's an eyeline, there are these features that then also have feather groups. So this is the page from the course. I'm just giving you a little sneak peek. So this would be the course on what are feather groups, finding feather groups. And so I have my version of the same sort of Sibley guide inspired colorations. But what I then do is help you find them on references. So I'm going to play just a little bit from that course for you all.
Jane, is there sound that goes with this?
Oh, there is. Are you not able to hear
Yeah,
this?
I don't think we can hear it. Maybe you can just narrate, or I'm not sure. Sometimes it doesn't come through the audio.
Oh, I'm so sorry, you guys. Okay, so what I'm showing you, and I use this sparrow as an example because conveniently the sparrow's markings really follow feather groups. So I start with an easy bird, and I'm walking through and tracing the different feather groups on a reference so that you can start to see these very distinct like shadows and edges that really separate the different feather groups. So here, the eyebrow, I'm tracing the eyebrow and it goes all the way around and meets back up with the orbital feathers there. And then the auriculars, I think of them as cheek feathers, but they actually are covering they're called auriculars because they're covering the ear hole of a bird. And the space right in between and the eyebrow and the auriculars is the eye line. Okay, and the other side of the eye are the lores. Yeah, so I say this is the area where you can imagine your glasses sitting, right? So I'm really trying to relate it back to our own body parts. Yeah, so this is the nasal tuft would be just like on the bridge of the nose. And this I almost think of as like the jawline, of a bird. So then you're like, oh, okay, there are our feather groups. And it's really helpful. So let's go through this American crow because this is interesting because on a all black bird, it can be even more, or a uniformly colored bird, it can be even trickier to find all the feathers. So the way that you can really see um, on a all one color bird is looking at subtle changes in the shadow on those edges, but then also the texture of the feathers. You'll see that there are these different textures of feathers. And as we draw in the shapes there, you'll be able to start to see that, oh, and there's all these directional changes of the feathers as well that I can start cluing into that help me understand the different feather groups. So right now I'm just really following those subtle shadows that allow me to see the crown of the crow. Yeah. So then what I just said there was that direction of the feather growth can also cue you in because you can see um, against the nasal bristles, the crown's going this way, the nasal bristles are going this way, but even on the face, you can start to see all the directional changes that the feather groups create. So now I'm following that throat again, and you can see there's like that dark space right there, and that shows you that those are like there's a slight separation of the grouping of feathers there. And the nape is really cool because this is a great example of how different the mantle feathers are against the nape. Okay, so here I am tracing up and around, and I'm now following those auriculars up, and you can even see how the direction of these feathers and even the texture of the two feathers has a slight difference. So now there's that eye ring again, which is still a group of feathers, even though they're featherless. And now we have our orbital feathers that are clearly defined. Here's another clear edge there that butts up against the eyebrow. And so now I'm drawing in that, and you can see that right there. There's an indentation there and a slight shadow. And then here's another slight shadow that then really defined the auriculars. And then, of course, that space in between is the eye line. And here is the lures. And now crows have nice exaggerated lures. Um, so that's the other thing, you know, even though feather birds come in all these different shapes and feather types, they're always going to have the same grouping of feathers. And I love, of course, the nasal feathers on all corvids. Beautiful feathery nose. And then we have one more feather. Oop, the malar right there. So there's several of these sort of videos that I walk you through in the course. And then there is another example where you can download these, and with tracing paper, you can just trace your own feather groups and see how well you do in terms of identifying your own feather groups. So now when I, paint and draw birds, from the sketch phase to the final, I'm always looking for those feather groups. And I walk you through in this course, it starts from, let's go back to that home page. So you can see the different, okay. Does it tell you? Oh, I wish you could, I'm not sure I can show you all the different parts, but it walks you through basic shapes. I actually walk you through the paints and the tools, and there's a color theory section, and then you're able to draw and paint a northern cardinal and a barn swallow with me. So for this birdie hour, I have created a time lapse of a Wilson's phalarope, and here I'm plotting out just like the different points on the page so I know it fits. So what I was saying is that when I'm building a drawing, I am really working in feather groups. So now I've identified my crown. I put in those lures. I put in that auricular. Now I'm looking at the nape feathers, and I'm looking at the throat. Where they fall on a bird there, I just kind of put in a gentle malar on Wilson's phalarope, and I start moving through and building out the different feather group from a feather group perspective. Right, so now I'm moving through the bird. I'm gonna, put in that mantle. I'm gonna put in the scapulars. I'm going to start putting in the different parts of the wing, which, the course definitely goes through the wing because that's a whole other thing. And of course, shorebirds have amazing wings and coverts and more coverts. So here are groupings of the coverts, and I'm now putting in the tertials, and I'm putting in my secondaries and my primaries and the vent and the rump. And so these are just all become parts in the anatomy of the bird that you can rely on to start making sure that you're drawing these birds accurately. But then when you're looking at various references, you can start to make shifts so you're not just copying a photo. But once you understand the feather groups, you can imagine, ooh, if the bird had its arm lifted, that feather group would be moving like this. And so that you can personalize and make decisions on the position and the posture that you want to see the bird have. So if I'm depicting the Wilson's phalarope with its feeding behavior when they're going for those flying insects on mud flats and saltwater flats. I'm putting in some tertials that are popping it up on the other side and moving into the secondaries. And then finally, I'll start adding in primary feathers. And I love the little stumpy tail of the Wilson's phalarope. Those primaries kind of come and meet the tail at the same distance. And I just think phalaropes are so stunning and sweet all at the same time. And I've got its leg, its foot, actually, technically, that would be the foot. And of course, I know you all know this too, but what we see of the leg of the bird is actually only the foot. And this part here that seems like it's like the knee is, of course, its ankle. And it has that long tarsus with the toes. Yeah, so a lot of little adjusting, but I think it really knowing these feather groups is gives you more confidence, when you're putting a bird together. It's like, oh, okay, I understand this shape, the form, the anatomy. And again, it's not about, remembering all the names of the feather groups. It's just where they are and how they move on the bird. And so here's a little time lapse of the phalarope that I'm putting color, and I'm using a similar technique of that the course will run you through, just so that you can sort of see. So I have them put down a base layer, and then the drawing is then traced over that base layer, and then you come in with the detail on top of that. And it makes for a really bold and dynamic painting, but it also is very, very fast when you go at it this way. So that is.
Well, we do have a few questions in the chat. So
Awesome.
Yeah, one question is, do you prefer to sketch on paper or digitally?
Oh, I think at heart, I'm definitely still a paper that I like using the physical materials, but definitely the digital platform. And when I do illustrate digitally, I like using my tablet, and I have a Samsung S7 tablet, and I use a program called Clip Studio Paint to create my illustrations. If you're familiar with the Bay Nature Almanac, the Bay Nature Magazine Almanac that I illustrate every season, those are all done digitally through the tablet and the Clip Studio Paint. But there's nothing beats for me the actual physical, using my hand.
Yep, the tactile.
Yeah.
The next question is, are you working from a photo with the Phalarope?
I am working from 2 photos because, for the good practice for using imagery that you're pulling from Google, you never want to just copy something. You always want to alter it. So I often select, 2 to 3 different references that I'll combine together.
Great. And another question is, have you thought about creating your own field guide?
Oh my gosh, that would be an absolute dream. I have wanted to do something along those lines. I feel like the Wall of Birds was a little bit of like that will suffice for now. Given the species that the number of species that we represent, the birds of the world at scale. So that's kind of its own sort of field guide. But I have always dreamed of doing one, and that's on my bucket list. I have too many things on my list to accomplish, but hopefully one day that will present itself.
Excellent, thank you, and thanks for the question. Another comment and question from Emerson is, it's awesome that you've had so much access to specimens throughout a lot of your projects.
Yes.
Other than feather grouping, do you have tips on how to get such lifelike color and form light if you can only work from photos and might not have access to the ornithologist or expert?
Definitely. I think that watching videos of birds too is really helpful. So that was a way where because can imagine for the wall of birds, I was not able to observe or even see all of the different skins or specimens of those birds. And I was also very reliant on just references as well. And videos to me were crucial because you can really watch the birds' behavior and movement. You can see it in different light. I think that it's helpful if you can build a maquette or like not even like a realistic one, but just have like a sphere and light it, and you can start to see how things are cast or shadows are cast. That can also be incredibly helpful. And then with color, I hope that you will take the course because I really do have a big section on color theory and mixing colors and the difference between hue and value and all of these different terms that can also be a little bit confusing.
Great, thanks for the question. Thanks for the answer. Cherise says, for your art practice, how important is it for you to observe birds in the wild versus painting, observing from reference photos?
Yeah, it's quite important to me. I think that I feel that pull of wanting to be out in the field and being in the studio, and but my art practice often keeps me in my studio. But I do try to make as many field trips as I possibly can. And I'm really excited to be something called the Forest Fellow for Sempervirens Fund, which is another conservation organization here, and they focus on understanding and protecting coast redwoods of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And part of that forest fellowship is being able to be very active in the field and being out there and bringing that back into my practice. So I'm really grateful for opportunities when I get to do both, or when the project allows me to have the experience of birding and being out in the field. And so when I was painting the Cornell Lab of Zoology's murals, I definitely went out with their ornithologists often to just do urban birding, and it's just such a delight.
Great, thank you. The next question is, do you have any tips for drawing birds' feet? Your work is so inspiring.
Thank you. Yes, bird feet. I felt when we joked about this when we were making the course for Bird Academy, it's like, man, we're going to have to make another one just on bird feet because it's really tricky. And I don't have necessarily any tips other than maybe just become familiar with the skeleton of that particular bird and trust your eye in those cases, where those joints are and how they bend and move. But they are incredibly tricky. And maybe don't bog yourself down with all the like scale details on feet. I definitely don't.
Excellent, thank you. Next question is, what's your daily art practice like? What's your favorite medium for depicting birds?
Oh, well, my daily art practice is it's varied because I do have a lot of things going on here in the studio. As I said, we are located in Half Moon Bay, and we have projects kind of ongoing. So I just tackle what I have on my plate. But when left to my own devices, my art practice often looks a lot more like sketch books and notes and journaling and thoughts to sort of work out ideas. And then I'll come up with a painting and just dive in, and I lose many hours without even realizing it once I'm deep in my painting. It's hard to stop.
In the zone, for sure.
Yeah.
Next question from Rafaela is how to progress from painting on paper to painting walls. Maybe a little bit about how that was for you.
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and I love giving the answer that it's almost the same. The techniques that I use for painting on paper versus painting on the wall, I just bring right over to them. So to that surface. And so I would just say when I'm transferring, I'm still using carbon paper, for example, on a wall. All of the drawings on the wall of birds, once I had my drawing I scanned it so that I could scale it to the correct size. And then that printout was taped to the wall, and I just slipped a piece of carbon paper behind it, like it was a piece of paper, and just traced it on the wall and painted it. The only thing to get used to is working vertically and on a fixed surface, because you can't move your paper around. So if that is something that you find yourself doing a lot, is moving your paper all around, then I would just say try a rigid surface that you just hang on the wall and don't move and paint and see how that feels. And then you're set to paint on a wall after that.
That's cool. Carrie asks, do you have any tips for capturing the soft texture of down while still maintaining the detail? A piece she's working on currently has her stumped with this.
Ooh, yeah, for me, down is like texture. And in the course, I actually have another segment and another video all on useful mark making textures for feathers and for other depicting other kinds of textures.
Thank you. The next question is, do you teach courses at CSUMB?
I was for 3 years a zoological illustration teacher for the science illustration program. I ultimately ended up leaving that position as it was hard to balance my other work with teaching. So I no longer teach there. But I'm hoping one day, and this is really far down the road, I think, but I have another dream of being able to open up our studio doors to a workshop series where it would include not just me as an instructor, but other studio assistants and illustrators that are on Inkwell's team that would have all kinds of different courses, from plein air to field sketching, to birds, anything.
Excellent, thank you. Neela asks, do you have a bird feeder or other bird attractor in your art studio? She's curious to know what you do to take a break from painting while you are working.
Well, luckily, I get to just walk right outside, and I am located in Pillar Point Harbor. So I can walk over to the water. I can take a walk up and just hike around a little bit and take a stroll. And there are many, many hawks and birds that just come right over here to us. So I do love getting to just be, again, right here in nature.
It's a good reminder to get out and remind yourself what you're doing all this for sure.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, let's see. Cherry asks, do you have a favorite bird to draw or that you keep going back to?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm gonna say no, I don't have a favorite or that I keep coming back to. I often find that whichever bird ends up being the subject in the current piece is like that current favorite, because I'm really diving so deep into that particular species. But what I do love is if I have worked on a painting or a piece of art where I wasn't able to observe that bird in the wild, when I get to actually go and see that bird in the wild, it is the most satisfying experience. And so I had a little bit of that. I mentioned that I was in New Zealand several years ago, and I got to see a good number of the birds that were included in New Zealand on that trip, and that was just awesome. So anytime I do go on vacation, I absolutely make a point to schedule some kind of a birding walk or tour, and it is such a joy to see birds. Oh my gosh! I was just thinking at Confluence, I painted that in the spring, and so being able to go to High Island and see all the bird migrating, I spent several days there. That was just extraordinary. When we walked into the rookery, I just couldn't stop crying. It was so beautiful.
Well, as you're describing it, I'm struck by what an intimate experience it is to draw the birds and then go see them, and that deep dive connection. And we often talk about our outreach programs here being really about helping people connect and to see the beauty in the birds and to make it personal. And so
Yes.
you just kind of illustrated how that plays out in your work, and that you get to do both. You have the time where you create them, and then the time that you enjoy them. And I just wanted something else that I kind of thought about as I was listening to you is the idea of specimens. You know, SFBBO has some bird specimens. I know that the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society has some, and Environmental Volunteers does. And I think that I will make a point to talk to the team to see if there might be in the future an opportunity to check out specimens, or to have an event where we have specimens out where artists can come, because you really shared how important it is to see the three-dimensional bird as well as photos. And so thank you. I'll bring that back to SFBBO as maybe.
Oh my God, that is extraordinary. That would be such a useful resource.
Great, thank you. And I think it looks to me like that's all the questions. We just have lots and lots and lots of thank yous.
Oh, good. You're very welcome.
Jane, it was really wonderful to see your artwork and to see how you do it and to hear your stories. And do you have anything that you'd like to share at the end here to wrap up?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for the time and for tuning in. And also, if you'd like to come and check out Inkwell as a studio, please also feel free to use that same email and schedule an appointment, because we are not open necessarily to the public, as this is our working studio. But if you're just curious to see what we're up to, or just see the space, please let me know and reach out, and we can certainly schedule that.
So thank you again, Jane, for coming and doing
You're so welcome.
And thank you to everybody who participated tonight. I really hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. And we did record it, so we will have the recording later on our website. And I hope everybody has a pleasant evening, and that we get to see you out birding soon. Take care. SFBBO is a nonprofit. With your support, we will continue to inform decision makers, inspire people to act, and involve diverse communities in our work. Please visit our website to learn more and get involved today.